I need to tell you guys this ghost story. There's something wrong with my babysitting job. Quit the job. Quit the job. If you're having to deal with creepy children and paranormal things, quit right now. Before I even start reading this, I'm already freaked out. Number one, children and me, especially creepy children, not my favorite thing in the world. It's probably the scariest thing to me is having children who are scary. Babysitting, I think having to be in someone else's space while weird things are going on is even more terrifying because you don't really know the space unless you've been there a really long time. But even if you have been there a really long time, just the fact that it's not your space is already just terrible. I don't really know how to start this. I'm not sure if I'm overreacting, but I can't sleep and I need to write it out. I've been looking for a job for a while, babysitting, cleaning, anything. One morning around 5 a.m., I got a call from a no-caller ID asking if I was available to babysit at a countryside Victorian manor and if I could start the next day. Are we in a horror book? No interview, no questions. No ma'am. But the job sounded too good to pass up and I like old houses. I mean, me being super as nosy as I am, I'd go just to see the house. I'm not even kidding. They sent a driver to pick me up. What the actual hell is happening? What the actual hell is going on? Are we kidding? He barely spoke and at one point told me to put my phone away because there's bad signal out there anyway. I'm in a bad dream. I'm in a bad dream, actually. There is no damn way. When we pulled up, the place was massive but really nice. Big Victorian manor, fountains out front, statues, loads of flowers. Definitely not abandoned. The woman who runs the place came out to meet me. Inside smelled old but clean, like wax and flowers, not so much like an old people's home. There are 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. The boy is 7 and the 2 girls 6 and 3. I wasn't really introduced. They were already sitting at a long table when I came in, no TV, no toys. The youngest stuck to me straight away. The middle one was loud and playful, and the boy barely reacted and just watched me. I literally felt like I stepped into the past. You have actually stepped into probably every single scary movie I have ever watched in my entire life. The first few days were normal. I did basic babysitting stuff, meals, keeping the youngest occupied, reading, tidying up toys that barely got used. I learned pretty quickly they're on a strict routine, same meal times, same bedtimes, everything was precise. Yesterday I went to my bedroom after putting the little ones to bed, only to hear some loud screaming coming from the middle girl's bedroom. I rushed over to see what was going on to find her rolling side to side with her eyes closed. I was told the middle girl has night terrors, which can be treated, but I've come to realize that these people live in the past and reject modern world. What stuck out to me was what the girl said she saw. Tall black cloaks that were hollow with red beady eyes. Apart from the nightmares, nothing felt dramatic enough to freak out about at the time. After that, I started noticing small things, symbols carved into doors and banisters that don't look decorative. I don't know how true that story was, but if it was, you need to run. You need to get the hell out of there, okay? Otherwise, very entertaining story. I actually really liked reading it. Next one is called Spoke with the Deceased Woman on a Police Call. I have heard about this happening multiple times. There was one call I went to a death notification that really freaked me out. I had to contact some family members of a deceased woman that was involved in a fatal car accident a few miles away from her home. When I arrived to meet a woman near the roadway just inside the property gate, she said she heard me coming from miles away. I asked her if she lived at the residence, which she confirmed she did. I already don't like this. After asking her to speak with me at the house, she agreed, but said she needed to walk as the house was about 75 yards from the road. After making it to the house, I approached the front door on a small wooden porch and began scanning the driveway for the woman. It was about 1 a.m. and completely dark. While looking for the woman, the front door opened and a younger woman appeared. She was concerned about my presence and asked if everything was okay. I asked if I could speak with her and she welcomed me in. I told her I would wait for the woman I met near the gate and she told me nobody else should be home. I then freaked out and began searching the property. Nothing. After entering the residence, I told her and her husband the news about Susan, which ended up being her mother. She said her mother moved in a few months back and that her father had passed away and wasn't handling it well. While she and her husband were comforting one another, I began looking through the photos on the wall. There was the picture of the mid-aged woman that stuck out to me. She was a younger version of the woman I spoke with near the gate. While looking at the picture, the daughter confirmed that this was her mother. The woman that passed in the wreck! No! I spoke with the ghost of the individual that died in the crash. Get me out.
listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of when me and my cousin wanted peaches from this particular house, and we were in the villages, by the way, and this grandma refused, and her peaches were really big and they looked juicy on the tree, and she refused, and we decided to steal them, and we saw her at night in our house and nobody else did. So this one time, we're walking to my cousin's posi. A posi, by the way, guys, is where somebody lives. It makes more sense to say we're walking to my friend's posi rather than to say we're walking to my friend's house, because my friends don't have a house. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Hopefully you guys understand. So remember I told you all that my cousin lived uphill, my grandma lived downhill. So we were walking to my house, my cousin's house, and I remember that day we were taking a pot to my aunt's place. How I see this house that has a tree full of peaches. Mind you, we also have a peach tree at home, but they're not as big as those, and ours are already finished. So I'm like, hey, bro, like, let's go ask this grandma, because usually the people in the village are actually nice. Like, they're not stingy with their fruits, right? So I'm like, let's go ask this grandma for peaches. My cousin's like, you know, she's the last person you would want to be asking. You think other people have not tried? She will never give you those peaches. You can go try and ask her, but she won't give you. So I'm just like, what? I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to listen to my cousin. I'm going to go and try, you know. I'm going to put on my nice face and I'm going to ask her so I can prove my cousin wrong. I go inside as I open the gate and I'm walking towards the veranda to walk towards the door, she comes out first and she's like, what do you want? You child of a witch. I'm like, oh, my mom is not a witch. What are you talking about? I was just looking like, yeah, you know? And she was like, yeah, what do you want, child of a witch? I was like, no. I was like, I'm here to ask for peace. She's like, no, don't you guys have a peach tree at home? I don't want you guys bothering you. Get out of my house before I call the dog on you. Get out. And then she starts calling her dog, and her dog was sitting behind the house, and I had to run out because the dog was actually chasing me. I'm like, hi, but when I go out, my cousin was laughing at me. He's like, I told you. Shapo. I'm like, you know what, whatever. So when we get to my aunt's place, I tell my aunt what happened, and my aunt also laughs at me. Guys, I'm traumatized. Why aren't y'all comforting me? And my aunt is like, that lady's evil, like, don't mind her, that's just how she is, you know. We don't really bother her in the village. Like, you know, people that are spiritually evil and also physically evil. Yeah. So I didn't understand when she said physically evil, because what do you mean? I mean spiritually evil, because what do you mean she's spiritually evil? Like, when she prays, I don't get it. But anyways, fine. As we're leaving the house to go back to my grandma's house, my cousin takes a plastic with him. I'm like, what are you going to do with that plastic? He's like, you'll see. Sharp. Walking back, we're talking. She's like, my cousin is like, do you still want those peaches? I'm like, yeah, I still want those peaches. Like, okay, fine. He knows a way that he and his friends sometimes use to steal this lady's peaches. I'm like, serious? He's like, yeah. I'm like, sharp, let's go. And because my cousin also like hyped me up, because he was like, let's not let that lady insult you. That's wrong of her. We're not gonna allow her to play with us like that. I was like, yeah, my cousin is standing up for me. And then after that, we jumped the fence, y'all, and we started picking peaches. So one of us was on top of the tree, the other one was on the floor. I was on the floor, my cousin was on top of the tree, because, you know, he's a little bit slimmer than me and he can run faster. You know, I will run first and then he will run after if that old evil grandma catches us. So he's throwing the peaches on the floor, and I'm picking them up, putting in the plastic, like, we're doing quick things. So after that, he jumps down because the plastic was full, and we jumped the fence. But I remember, I'm not sure, guys, but I remember I looked back and I looked at this lady. She had a garage, right? I looked back and I seen at her garage there was something that was looking at us through the window, but I couldn't like tell what was that, you know. So I was just like, okay. And then we jumped the fence and then we left. We got to my grandma's house, washing the peaches, we're eating them. My aunt is like, where did you guys get these peaches, right? And you know, my cousin is like, we got them from somewhere. What is your problem? Because, you know, my cousin was a little bit, you know, disrespectful. And I backed him. I was like, yeah, we got them from somewhere. Why you prying us? You trying to get us into trouble? And these are those aunts, man, that they are your aunt because they are your aunt, but they're really not that old, you know? You get what I'm trying to say? Like, we were like, what? 9, 10. My cousin was like 13, and my aunt is like 21. So, like, you know, why you being messy, girl? How, guys, we're sitting watching TV. I think it was around 9 p.m. We were all sitting watching TV. My grandparents had already gone to sleep. I look in the kitchen. 9 p.m. mind you, the drawer opens itself. And I'm like, huh? So I'm just like, what the hell? And I look at my cousin like, did you just see that? Because me and my cousin were sitting like, I was sitting here, you could see that I was sitting in such a place where you can see the kitchen, and my cousin was also sitting facing the kitchen door. So I'm just like, I look at my cousin, he looks at me, and we just think, nah, nah. How? Next thing, the drawer opens again, and I'm just like, you know what? This is my cue to actually go to sleep. Big mistake. I was sitting, okay, we eventually go to the room and we're playing games because, I feel like we're bugging. Me and my cousin were playing games, whatever. It's time for us to go to sleep. My cousin sleeps on there's a single bed in that particular room, and then there's a double bed. I'm sleeping on the double bed with my mother. My cousin's sleeping on the single bed. When I tell you, I eventually fall asleep, and I have this dream, right, where I am standing in the garage door, that grandma's garage door, and there is this person that he's beating up, and after he beats this person up, he comes out of the garage and he looks at me, right, because I couldn't see, it was really dark in the garage. So this person comes out and he's like, why did you guys steal peaches? Now they beat me up for your guys' sins. And I'm like, who are you? And he doesn't say. He's like, I don't remember what my name is. But then I'm like, hey, but what's happening? He's like, you guys shouldn't have stolen those peaches. I saw you guys stealing them and I didn't do anything, and now I'm getting punished for your guys' sins. Like, I'm like, yeah. And then, as I'm standing in the garage door, this grandmother calls this thing again, this person that I told you earlier on I had seen in the window, and he calls him again and he starts beating him. And as I'm looking, this grandma realizes that I'm there, and then she comes out and she starts chasing me. And as she's chasing me, I run. And at the corner, she can see that she's not about to catch me. And because she beat up her slave or whatever that was, she's like, because she beat that person up and he can't chase after me, she's like, yeah, this is why I'll keep stealing your guys' spoons, because you guys stole my peaches. I'm like, girl, what? And I woke up sweating that day. And when I woke up, there was something in the kitchen. There was so much movement in the kitchen, and I was just like, listen, I am not about to get up because I needed to go drink water. I was thirsty because I was running in the gym. Probably was running in real time too, but so I didn't get up, y'all. I waited for the day the daylight to come, and I woke up, y'all, and I told my cousin about the dream. And my cousin is like, he had the same dream, but in the dream he was actually fighting this boy. And I'm like, this is how the boy looked. He was like, yeah, he was actually fighting this boy. And so we made our own little theory that you were probably fighting the boy and you actually won, because he ran back home and the boy went back, and then he started beating and the grandma started beating the boy. That's when I came into play. I don't know, yo. I don't know. That went on about one day or whatever, and I remember we were supposed to go to my aunt's place again, and we saw this grandmother, and we did not even flinch, we did not even look at her, and she just stood at her gate and she was laughing at us because she knew what she had done. And after that, like, it was okay. And it's crazy because she eventually died, like a couple of months later she died, and no one went to her funeral. That's how evil this lady was. No one. It was only family that actually went to her funeral, because this lady was very evil. And after that whole ordeal, I remember they actually burnt down the house. After the funeral, the family members burnt down the house, and apparently they said that there were spirits there, so they wanted to burn the spirits. I don't know if you can burn a spirit, so that the spirit can actually go with the grandmother. So if she was using dead people, they need to go back to their graves or whatever. And they actually burned down the house with furniture and everything in it. It was so crazy. But they didn't burn the peach tree, because they did rebuild another house and somebody else stayed there, and that person does give us peaches from time to time, which is fun. Those nice people that are like, take the peaches, but don't forget to clean up when you're done. And yeah, don't be evil. Don't be evil. You're not gonna finish a whole peach tree with your entire family. It eventually gets tiring. Give the peaches to people. What?
Let's read some true ghost stories. If you're new here, I'm Krista, and on my account we talk about weird events, paranormal story times, and everything in between. So if you're interested in that genre of content, be sure to give me a follow. Today we have a pretty large Reddit thread called "What is the most undeniable evidence we have for ghosts being real?" A friend of mine doesn't believe in the paranormal, and I want to convince him. The most important event for me occurred between 2011 and 2013. The following happened about 15 years ago at a ranch-style house in the middle of the country, surrounded by farmland and sparsely spaced houses. I haven't talked to my dad in years, am a very headstrong skeptic and also an atheist, but have become spiritual in my late 20s and 30s. I believe in the universe and energy, if that makes sense. It was between 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. at night, and my dad and I were home. He was in his office room with the radio very loud, and I was in the living room working on community college homework. My dad can't hear very well due to a lifetime of severe hearing damage from farming, hunting, trucking, loud music, loud vehicles, and manual labor work while mostly not using hearing protection. He wears 2 good quality hearing aids and still cannot hear very well, and I highly doubt he was wearing them at this time, especially since his office radio was cranked up loud. We both heard the kitchen door open with a pop, squeaking kind of sound, which was the typical sound when opened. Work boots walking heavy on the kitchen floor. We all wore work boots because we were outside laborers and walked heavy, and the sound of both the work boots being taken off and being dropped on the kitchen floor, which is what we, my dad, little brother, and I did, and a very common noise. My dad and I both heard it and figured it was my little brother coming home. However, the outside free-roaming dogs hadn't barked and the driveway alarms didn't go off. Maybe the dogs were out roaming, or maybe the driveway alarms didn't pick up the car, how we tried to rationalize it. But I called my brother and he was 45 minutes away. I told my dad to grab his pistol because there was either someone or something in the house with us. So he did, and we searched the entire house room by room, upstairs, ground floor first, and then downstairs, and then looked outside. It was just us. I said that we should search the outside too, and my dad said nobody is here, implying no other physical persons. And why would an uninvited stranger take off their boots? To which I agreed that made sense, but we were both 100% certain we heard something. It should be noted that my dad is a very immature person, likely a narcissist, and doesn't like to admit he's wrong or flawed. He even said something along the lines of, "Damn, I can't believe I heard that." You could be standing right next to the man on the quietest day possible, and if he is not actually paying attention to you, he won't hear you. If I had just experienced that experience myself, I probably would also have dismissed it or doubted myself, but since his hearing is literally that horrible and he heard it too, there's no way I can or will. Not to mention, his office room is on the opposite side of the house to the kitchen. My little brother's experiences. In that house, my little brother experienced seeing shadow people for years, multiple ones at times too, constantly hearing boots walk in the kitchen and connecting dining room at or around 3 a.m, having something heavy but unseen crawl on or be in his car after visiting what he calls the demon house in the closest town with a friend whose family was renovating the house to rent out. The friend was in the car while something crawled on it. Having the same friend tell him that it feels like you're being watched while in the basement of my dad's house and mention the basement hallway, hearing children in our home laugh, as well as tell him help me/us, being upstairs and hearing my mom call his name from the basement while she wasn't home, constantly seeing the Hat Man, and many, many more stories. My eyes watered again as I edited this, and I got goosebumps typing all of this these years later. He could literally write a Harry Potter-sized novel on everything he experienced because it was that frequent and over that long of a period. There was a time in my teenage years about 15 years ago, probably between 2007 and 2010, to where I swear I heard something breathe heavy directly in my left ear. However, over time, as I told others about it, I began to doubt myself and thought maybe I heard my own breathing. Nowadays, I'm unsure of the validity of that event, but when it happened, it scared me enough to where I jumped/fell out of the chair I was sitting in. The following occurred likely between 1999 to 2002. Another event is that my older sister said she saw what she thought was my little brother when he was just a toddler and she was a young child, but it turns out it was a toddler-like, light-like figure. Sometime during the middle of the night when she got up to use the bathroom, she thought she saw my little brother in the hallway by the bathroom. She walked up very close to it because it had its back to her, and she called out my little brother's name to it. It wasn't my little brother. She locked herself in the bathroom, fell asleep in the bathroom, and wouldn't come out until someone woke up, knocked on the door, and vocalized who they were. That was 25 plus years ago, and eventually as she got older, she wouldn't talk about it anymore. The most recent event I know of, probably between 2017 to 2019, is that my dad and an ex of his were in the basement. They were standing near the hallway in the basement and had a ping pong ball tossed at them from the basement hallway. For descriptive purposes, the basement is/was mostly still how it was when it was built in the 70s, the right side of it being a big open area, a bar, and a bedroom. The left side being a hallway with 3 rooms, 2 on the left side and 1 big one on the right. In the big room on the right of the hallway, there's a ping pong table. This hallway does not have light. Each room only has a singular light. That hallway is pitch black. The entire basement is very dark, as the basement walls have/had very dark brown wood panels and inadequate lighting, and the hallway is just tall and wide enough to walk through. It would be impossible for the ball to roll at them from the height that it was projected at them, and it would have had to come from the center of the room on the right around a 90-degree turn through and around the doorway and down the hallway, at least 15 to 25 feet. And the last event was on September 29, 2024. A friend who is a direct neighbor brought over some homemade apple cider and soup. After she left, I heard a disembodied voice say something I couldn't make out, and my dog reacted to it too. If someone else told me these events, I probably wouldn't believe them, so I understand if you don't, but these are all true stories. I think that sometimes when it comes to paranormal stories, if it's just one person saying they saw this or heard this, it can be really chalked up to like, oh, either like hallucinations or delusion or whatever it is. But when multiple people hear and experience the same exact thing, like the original story we heard about the original poster and their dad hearing someone taking off their work boots and walking around the house, it becomes more undeniable, I think. I have my own personal experiences with ghosts, but not as severe as this. But again, I don't think when it's multiple people, you can't really chalk it up to a shared delusion. If any of you have any stories you'd like me to read, be sure to comment them down below or message me and I will get to them. I'm hoping to do a viewer story series soon. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video. Let's read another true and scary story from the Appalachian Mountains. If you're new here, I'm Krista, and on my account we talk about weird events, paranormal story times, and everything in between. So if you're interested in that genre of content, be sure to give me a follow. We're going to be reading some stories from a chain called Does Anyone Have Any Real Horror Stories from the Appalachian Mountains? Real story here from Southern Appalachia. Not the craziest horror type story, but still scared the hell out of me. In August of 2022, I solo overnight camped in the Sumter National Forest up in the far northwest corner of South Carolina. My third and last time ever solo camping out in the middle of the mountains/woods. I feel like I'm a pretty seasoned outdoorsman, and I wasn't that far out to where this would have been irresponsible. Anyway, I parked my car on an old logging road and hiked in about 1.5 to 2 miles to the top of the ridgeline that was near an area that had just been cut by loggers probably in the spring that year. I was about 5 miles from the nearest sign of civilization. I was testing out some new camp gear, just getting some solitude. It was pretty and peaceful and kind of hot and humid. Found a nice spot to set up camp right on the edge of the tree line bordering a grassy area on top of the ridge. The afternoon and evening went by without any issue. I had a cramped 1.5 man-sized tent and left off the rainfly because it was so hot, so it was mostly just netting that sort of let me see out of the tent, but not too well. I went to sleep and woke up from a nightmare at 4:36 a.m. I remember because I looked at my watch. The nightmare was me in my tent exactly where I was in the exact position I was laying. In the dream, I woke up and looked to my left and saw a large dark figure with red eyes staring right at me from outside the tent. I woke up for real in a cold sweat and thought that was effed up. And maybe a minute after that, I heard a blood-curdling scream that had to be right in the vicinity of my little camp area. I was absolutely frozen in fear. It kind of sounded like a combination of an owl scream and a fox scream, if you can try to imagine. About another 30 seconds goes by that felt like an eternity, still frozen in fear, and then something big, like full sprint, stomped through my campsite. It was 100% bipedal and heavy because I could feel the vibration on the ground. I had a pistol and an AR-15 style rifle with me in the tent, both with weapon lights. I somehow mustered up the courage and grabbed my rifle, unzipped the tent, and switched the light on and quickly scanned around with it. Pure adrenaline. I saw nothing, no sign of anything. At this time, there were zero sounds of bugs/critters, and if you know the South, the woods can be loud AF at night. That scared the living shit out of me. That part didn't even hit me until later on when I was recounting everything, which made me even more scared. Anyway, I stayed awake, scanning the woods pretty much non-stop until the first light, and quickly packed up and got the fuck out to the car. What's weird is I have been to this area many times with my brother and friends doing little campouts, shooting, and land nav type of stuff for fun, and I've never had anything weird happen, not even a weird or off feeling. Always felt safe and comfortable until that night. Since then, I've gone near that exact area again, but no closer than a mile or two, and always had dudes with me for overnight camps. Nothing strange or scary has happened since. I don't know what it was. Some people I've told said it was maybe the dog man or Bigfoot. I truly don't know and don't want to. And there are more comments saying that something similar happened to them, and people are trying to rationalize it. Somebody said it could totally be black bears, they're very common in the Appalachian Mountains. But it's strange because I think someone like the original poster who has been hiking and camping a lot would know what a black bear sounds like. So the fact that someone who's really experienced is even freaked out and considering that this might be the dog man or Bigfoot, I don't think it was a bear. Definitely very weird and creepy stuff. I think the Bigfoot stories always freak me out. And now I've never heard of Dogman, but I looked into it and now I think I'm more afraid of Dogman than Bigfoot. So that's great. As always, if you guys have any stories you want me to read, be sure to comment them or message them, and I will see you in the next one.
We've had a recent black-eyed children sighting, and this one is really creepy. Now, this young man who said he worked at this convenience store, he said one night he was closing up, and the last thing that he would do was lock the front door. So he said he made his way to the front door, he turned the latch, and he checked it to make sure it was closed. Well, the next thing he knows, he said he looked up and there were 3 teenagers, all dressed in black, standing at the front door. So he was told by his boss, like, never open the door after closing. And so he starts saying, like, go away, we're closed for the night, you have to leave. And they responded, please let us in, we need to use your phone. But it was almost mechanical. And he said, look, we're closed, like, you have to go, you can't be here, I can't let you use the phone. And he said then they started to get aggressive and they started really banging on this door and they started trying to open it. And he gets, freaked out. So he runs to the back of the store and he goes into the office. So he said as he was sitting in the office hoping these kids would go away, he looks at the security camera. And that's when he sees all 3 of them in the store standing in the aisle. So he takes off out the back door and he calls his boss. Like, there are these 3 teenagers, they've gotten in the store, like, I don't know what they're doing. So his boss says, hold on. He drives there, and when he gets to the store, he can see that the lights are still on, but everything is locked up. And he goes inside, it's completely empty, there's no one in there, and he couldn't figure out what this employee was talking about. So he goes to the security cameras, and as he replays them, he doesn't see these 3 kids that he was talking about. All he sees is this employee scared talking to someone who isn't there at the front door.
Hey guys, it's time for another spooky story. I am Autumn in Appalachia. If you have a spooky story of your own that you would like to share, feel free to send me a DM. Make sure as well to add me on Facebook, same handle, Autumn in Appalachia. Without further ado. This story was sent to me back at the end of August from the user True Blue. We're going to call her True for the video, and y'all buckle up because it is a creepy one. And if you are a Lord of the Rings fan, you're going to have a really vivid, mental image when I share what she saw, something that still haunts her to this day. So in 2021, True moves into a house with her boyfriend. Nothing creepy or weird ever happened the entire time that she lived there, but in 2023, after she broke up with her boyfriend, everything changed. So when she breaks up with the boyfriend, she leaves. She leaves the house. She's gone for 3 months. For one reason or another, in July of 2023, 3 months later, she has to return to the house and she's going to be staying for a short amount of time. Now, she knows that there's a potential that the only person that she's going to encounter while she's back at the house is her ex's brother. He was potentially going to just swing by for a visit, see the dog, see her, and that's pretty much it, right? So she goes back, she spends all day cleaning, straightening up, she's worn out at the end of the day, she settles into bed, and she ends up dozing off with the TV on and the lights on. True had not been asleep for too long when she finds herself having one of the most vivid sleep paralysis experiences that she's ever had. She said that she woke up and when she looks into the corner of her room, she sees this older man or creature crouched, and they were in this stance, facing her, like they are about to jump on her or pounce on her. It was very animalistic, and it absolutely terrified her. She cannot move, she cannot breathe, she does not know what to do, and she said that The only way she can think to describe what this thing looked like was that it looked like Gollum off Lord of the Rings. And if any of you guys, for any reason, have not seen Lord of the Rings, we'll put a screen cap here, but I can just imagine, right? You got that bald head set for them little strings of hair, buggy eyes, the sharp teeth, unnaturally long limbs, like that grayish, doesn't quite look alive kind of color. This scared her so bad that for the next 2 months afterward, she slept with the lights on and kept a Virgin Mary candle lit on. Fuck the fire hazard. We're just trying not to be eaten by freaking Gollum in our bedrooms. And she keeps the candle lit all night. I don't blame her. I probably would have passed away and met my Lord and Savior Betty White. But I digress. So she, like I said at the beginning, she never had anything like this happen in the house before this, after this, never saw it again. But she does have 2 theories on why it potentially could have happened or why something like that appeared. So number 1, she had a mirror laying just face up in the bedroom floor. And they say mirrors can sometimes be portals or open portals for the spiritual realm to coincide with the physical. And then also her ex-mother-in-law, they call it, as she said, in the South, root work, or it's a form of witchcraft. Her ex-mother-in-law had tried to perform some sort of ritual on her that was of a darker nature, I'm assuming, or had some sort of ill intent behind it, just previously, in the past. And so maybe it was that. I don't know. You guys let me know what you think in the comments, what your theories are. Super freaking creepy. I am so thankful that for the sleep paralysis episodes I have had, while it was years ago, it was never anything like that. Thank God for me, when I have sleep paralysis, I've never seen anything. I just hear things or feel things, you know? Well, guys, that wraps it up for tonight. Y'all stay tuned for some more spooky stories. Also, I've been toying with the idea of potentially doing something on YouTube too, if y'all would be interested. By the way, I went down the rabbit hole recently because I've been seeing some of our stories, I should say, pop up in these scary story compilations on YouTube, and y'all in them comments are filthy. I mean, some of you, I clap back. I'm sorry, I'm freaking ridiculous. I clap back at 1 or 2 of you and sing y'all deserved it. Anyhow, if y'all would be interested in me doing the whole YouTube thing, let me know.
Let's read some more stories about when kids say or see creepy stuff. I posted another video like this and y'all really liked it, so here's some more. When my son was 3, we were visiting one of my friends at her new house, when all of a sudden, my son says, "Hello," and waves at someone upstairs. I asked who he was talking to, and he said, "The man upstairs." I asked him, "Did the man say hello back?" And he replied, "No, he has no mouth." I was babysitting my friend's toddler, who was playing in her room and talking to herself while I made dinner. I didn't pay it any mind until I heard her say, "I said stop." So I went to check on her and asked who she was talking to. She calmly pointed at the AC vent and said, "The family who lives in the vents. The little boy is bothering me." One day, my son was sitting in my lap in the living room of our house. He was about 3 years old. Out of the blue, he told me that he missed me when I was dead. I thought this was strange and maybe I had misheard him, so I asked him to repeat himself. He said, "Yeah, I missed you when you were dead. We lived in apartment number 8, and I was all alone after you were dead." He didn't seem upset about it at all. It was just matter of fact before he went on to talk about another subject. When my sister was about 1 year old, her and my mom would stay up all night while the rest of the house was asleep. My mom was a night owl, so naturally she didn't really mind staying up late looking after my sister. She told me one night while we were all asleep, except her and my sister, that something weird happened. My mom was sitting in the recliner, and my sister was propped on her lap facing her. My sister kept staring at the corner of the wall that meets the ceiling, staring and giggling. My mom turned around and obviously nothing was there, but she was still staring and smiling, happy as ever. even started waving. Eventually, my mom was so creeped out and got my sister's attention to do something else. The way our house is set up, our living room and kitchen are connected. Later on in the night, my sister was standing in the kitchen. My mom had the light off, so it was dark in there, and she was giggling at another corner. She was pointing, laughing, waving. Every now and then she would just stare off into the dark, and my mom would repeatedly call her name, and it still wouldn't get her attention. My mom got really creeped out that night. As far as I know, that was the only night it happened. My little girl is 1, and she does some creepy stuff sometimes. Examples are reaching for someone to pick her up when no one's there, waving at nothing, and when we're playing games with her, she always acts like there's another player. And one day she ran into the back hallway, and it sounded like she gave someone kisses and ran back to me, but I know that there's no one else in the house. It really gives me the heebie-jeebies. My 3-year-old daughter stood next to her newborn brother and looked at him for a while, then turned and looked at me and said, "Daddy, it's a monster. We should bury it." My coworker's 4-year-old daughter always thought that the rattling of the water pipes in the kitchen cupboards were white wolves, and the sound always scared her. One day she was sitting at the kitchen table and said, "Mom, the white wolves aren't bad. They're our friends." Her mom encouraged the idea by saying, "Yes, the white wolves are protecting us. They are our friends." Then her daughter added in, "They're our friends, but not the man who crawls on the floor and stands by my bed." Kids say some really scary shit.
After the party ended, Maya and a few of her friends decided to freshen up before bed. The main bathroom had a line stretching out the door, so they made their way to the wash area beneath the stairs. They were just brushing their teeth, talking about nothing important, when Maya noticed a movement at the edge of her vision. She looked up. There in the doorway of one of the nearby classrooms was Camille. Camille, or Cam, as everyone called her, was one of their group. She had a round, cheerful face and a smile that could light up a room. And right now, she was peeking out from behind the doorframe, and that familiar wide grin stretched across her face. Maya laughed. It was such a Cam thing to do. "What are you doing?" Maya called out. Cam just smiled wider. Then she ducked back into the classroom, disappearing from view. And Maya finished brushing her teeth, rinsed her mouth, and turned to the others. "Let's go get Cam." They walked to the classroom, still giggling about how ridiculous she looked. But when they stepped inside, the room was empty. A classmate was sitting near the window, scrolling through her phone. "Hey," Maya said, "did you see Cam come through here?" The girl looked up, confused. "Cam? No, I've been here the whole time. No one's come in or out." The laughter died in Maya's throat. They ran back to their room. And there was Cam, sitting on her sleeping mat with 2 other friends, looking perfectly normal. "Hey, where have you guys been?" Cam asked, annoyed. "We were looking for you guys. We ended up using Sir Garcia's room to wash up since you all disappeared." Maya couldn't speak. Her mouth had gone dry. "We saw you," Erica said. "You were at the classroom near the wash area. You smiled at us." Cam stared at her. "What are you talking about? I've been here the whole time. Ask them." She gestured to the 2 friends beside her. "They were with me. We never left." The silence that followed was suffocating. 8 girls standing in a room that suddenly felt too small, too dark. No one wanted to say what they were all thinking. So who had smiled at them? But Maya knew. They all knew. Something had worn Cam's face. Something had smiled at them with Cam's smile, and it had been close enough to touch. Then, about an hour later, they heard the screaming. It came from across campus, a girl's voice, high and panicked. Then more voices, shouting. There was a commotion. Their classmates came bursting into the room. "Someone's being possessed," one of them gasped. That senior, she started screaming out of nowhere. When they tried to calm her down, she fought them. Before Maya could process this, there was a knock at the door. A senior boy stood in the hallway. "Don't go outside," he said. "Lock the door. Pray before you sleep." Then he left, and they did what he said. One of the girls led them in prayer. Then one by one, they tried to sleep. But Maya couldn't. She lay on her mat, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence. Eventually, she got up to check her phone. As she walked to her bag near the window, her eyes drifted to the view outside. And there, walking slowly across the field, was a man. He was wearing a barong, the traditional formal skirt, white and embroidered, completely out of place in a school setting at this hour. His movements were slow. Something about the way he moved was familiar. The gait, the posture, it reminded her of the school guard. But the guard would be wearing his uniform, not a barong, not at this hour. "Hey," she whispered, turning to Chloe. "Do you remember what our school guard was wearing today?" Chloe looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Their uniform, obviously. Why? Maya turned back to the window. The man was gone. Maya never found out who or what that figure was. She never saw him again. The second day passed in a blur of activities. Maya almost forgot about the night before, almost convinced herself that nothing strange had happened. But then dinner came. They gathered in the gymnasium, plates piled with food, voices filling the air. Maya sat with her friends, trading stories about the day's events. And that is when Jessa brought up the senior again. "So I heard more about what happened," she said. "The girl under the mango tree, that was the one who got possessed. She doesn't remember any of it, doesn't remember standing there, doesn't remember screaming. The last thing she remembers is being at the program, then waking up in the faculty room." And Bea finally spoke. "When we saw her under that tree, it was like she was watching something we couldn't see. And when we tried to talk to her, it was like there was nobody home."
Weird spooky story time, and do you think this was an imaginary friend or something else? When I was a kid, we lived kind of on the outskirts of town. Not like middle of nowhere, but definitely not close to the city either. There was this little house a few doors down, and a girl my age lived there. Her name was Emily. I'd go over there all the time, and we'd play dolls or ride bikes or just hang out. I remember her mom too. She was always in the kitchen. Sometimes she'd bake us cookies or make us sandwiches. It felt super normal. Then one day, Emily just wasn't outside anymore. I asked my mom if maybe they moved, but she looked at me confused and said, "Nobody's lived in that house for years." I didn't believe her, so I went over myself. The place was run down, like way worse than I remembered. Wallpaper peeling off the walls, ceiling leaking, the whole house smelled musty, and there was dust on everything. No way anyone had been living there. It looked like it had been empty for at least 10 years. To this day, I don't understand it. I can still picture Emily's face, her room, even the kitchen where her mom would give us cookies. I don't know if it was a glitch in the Matrix, some kind of time loop. All I know is it wasn't just my imagination. I played with Emily like she was really there. This was a really short and sweet one, and I love these stories that come along where you're just like, what was that? And it's just so hard because when you're a kid, nobody believes you. But a memory that strong where you're like, no, I played with this girl. Where'd she go? Imaginary friends don't just cut off one day, they usually just slowly dissipate. So I don't know. What do you guys think this is? Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this? Let me know in the comments or send me your story.
Ever seen a shadow move across the wall out of the corner of your eye and then it's gone? Have you ever seen something peeking at you from out behind the door and then it disappears? Or something moving around in your bedroom at night when it's completely dark? These are called shadow people, and every year thousands of people encounter this entity. Now, this story comes out of Hendersonville, Tennessee. There's this man named Michael. Michael said during this period of his life, him and his girlfriend had got this apartment together. And he said this house was up against this big forest. And he said he hated driving at night down this road to get to his house because it was pretty spooky. Now, he didn't believe in anything supernatural or paranormal, but he said this one night he was coming home from work about 9 p.m. And as he drove down this road and he pulled into his driveway, he was overwhelmed with a sense of dread, like something was wrong. As he steps out of his car, he said he got this feeling like something was watching him. And as he turned around and he looked at the woods across the street, he sees this black figure move out of the forest and across the street. And he said as this thing moved across the street light started to flicker. And the light in front of his house started to flicker. So this freaked him out. He ran inside the house as fast as he could. And he said he couldn't explain it. He had no idea what he had just seen. After a couple weeks, he kind of forgot about this thing. But then he said another night he was asleep in bed. And he said his girlfriend was right next to him. Well, he wakes up about midnight. And he said he could see this black figure on the floor crawling around. And at the time, he just thought it was his dog. But, he didn't really pay attention to it. But it just kept moving back and forth around the bed, kind of crawling around. And that's when he turns over and he sees the dog is in the bed with him. So he turns on the light, and he jumps out of bed, and his girlfriend's like, "What's going on?" And he said there was something in the room, like this black shadowy figure. And she's like, "You must have been dreaming, like there's nothing in here." Next couple of nights, same thing happens. He would see this black thing crawling around his bedroom, sometimes on the wall, sometimes on the ceiling. And when he would turn the light on, it would be gone. About the fourth night of experiencing this, he turns the light on, and he said for a brief second, his girlfriend had actually witnessed this thing as well. Well, he started to notice on his drives home from work, he would see this black figure following along in the woods. And he would see it outside his home. And he would see it in the hallways. And sometimes out of the corner of his eye, peeking at him from a hallway. And he said, this went on for like months. And it started to scare him because he had no idea what he was experiencing. So his girlfriend reaches out to this paranormal investigator. And he says, "I think you're seeing a shadow person." And as they sat down to talk, he realized that he may have picked this thing up when he was visiting a cemetery with a friend one night. And it must have followed him home and attached itself to him.
I feel like with a lot of true crime cases, or I guess true crime in general, it's often just seen as entertainment. But the reason as to why I do these videos in the first place is because I hope to remind you that these cases are real. These things happen to real people. The families are real. The grief is real. The people mourning a loss is real. And you never think that it could happen to you until it does. And today's story especially is one of those for me that just serves as a reminder that sometimes it really is just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Lauren Burke was an 18-year-old freshman at Auburn University when she was kidnapped and taken from her own car. Her life was cut short at the hands of a truly sick and twisted man. Let's talk about it. Lauren Ashley Burke was born in Marietta, Georgia to her parents James and Vivian. She grew up in a suburb north of Atlanta in Cobb County, and she's been described by anyone who knew her as a bright, vivacious young woman whose smile lit up a room. She was one of 3 kids. She had a brother and a sister. And despite her parents' divorce when she was still young, Lauren maintained a very close relationship with both her mother and her father, who co-parented very well. And their family kept a close and tight, healthy relationship. Lauren attended Walton High School, and there she had a reputation as someone someone who would go out of her way to help others, and she was able to make friends very easily. Quote, she had many friends and was accepting of everyone. For those of us who were fortunate to know Lauren, we were blessed. Those words were said by a school counselor of hers. After graduating high school in 2007, Lauren enrolled in Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama. She chose Auburn because she wanted to pursue this passion that she had for the arts. She had big dreams to build a career on photography, and she wanted to major in graphic design and art. So off she went to Alabama, and when she got there, she threw herself into the college life, ready and excited for this new chapter in her life. She joined Delta Gamma during her freshman year, a sorority. She also joined Auburn's lacrosse team, continuing the sport that she once loved in high school, and she also got involved in an organization called Invisible Child, which supports starving children in Africa, very much demonstrating her desire and her want to make a difference in the world, a positive difference. But even though she was having fun, making new friends, enjoying college, she still managed to set enough time aside to be able to make calls home frequently. And she would often call her dad and just talk about her life, her plans, her classes, how everything was going. And by early 2008, she was thriving, truly. She was living in an off-campus apartment. She had a boyfriend, Sean McQuaid, who she had actually been dating in high school. They were high school sweethearts. All of Lauren's family adored Sean because he was so good for and to Lauren. They both cared about each other very deeply, and that was obvious. She was in the middle of making plans for her spring break with her friends. She was only 18 years old, but she really had her whole life ahead of her, and she was so excited about everything that was to come. But on the night of March 4th of 2008, everything would change in an instant. March 4th was a Tuesday, and around 9 p.m. that night, 911 received a phone call. The caller was calling to report an injured young woman lying in the middle of the road. She was wearing only socks, crying and gasping for air, very desperate for help. She was waving her arms, trying to get someone's attention to come and help her. First responders arrived to the scene at 9:12 p.m., and when they got there, they found the girl lying on the ground. She was unconscious, hardly breathing, with injuries all over her. It looked almost as if she had been thrown or pushed out of a moving vehicle because of the amount of scratches and cuts that she had all over her. When paramedics rushed over to her, they found a very faint pulse, and she was immediately rushed to the nearest hospital. That girl was 18-year-old Lauren Burke. At the same time, while Lauren was in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, other 911 calls began coming in, but this time they were coming from Auburn University on campus. Multiple people were calling to report a vehicle that was parked in the parking lot up in flames. Fire and police units were dispatched immediately, and they found Lauren's black 2001 Honda Civic engulfed in flames. Officers ran the license plate, and they saw that that car was registered to James Burke in Georgia, Lauren's father, so they called him to let him know. Lauren's dad was so confused, worried, sick. He had no idea as to why, one, the car would be on fire, and no idea as to where Lauren was or if she was okay. Naturally, then James tried to frantically call his daughter, obviously having no idea about the state that she had just been found in and that she was in an ambulance on her way to the hospital, and obviously he couldn't reach her. And then approximately only 1 hour after arriving at the hospital, around 10:35 p.m., 18-year-old Lauren Burke was pronounced deceased from a single wound that had punctured both of her lungs. James Burke arrived at the hospital shortly after because after finding Lauren's car in that state and not hearing from her, authorities had advised him to make the drive to Auburn. And when he got there, he got the news that his daughter had just passed. It's one of those situations where you get a phone call that worries you so much, but you don't want to assume the worst. But then you get there and you are given the worst news imaginable, and your entire world just pauses. I can't even imagine what he must have felt in that moment, and then having to make the phone call to his ex-wife, Lauren's mom, and her siblings. It's heartbreaking. But on top of that, it's also incredibly confusing because by all accounts, Lauren lived a very happy life with good friends, a good boyfriend, an amazing family. So how did she end up deceased on what felt like a random Tuesday? It made no sense to anyone. The investigation into Lauren's case began that same night immediately after investigators quickly realized that the car that had been found was directly connected to Lauren. It could not have been a coincidence that her car was found in that state shortly after she was found. They needed to figure out what happened. A man called Tommy Dawson was serving as assistant police chief at the time, and this is a quote from him, quote, March 4th of 2008. It was a cool night from March standards even. I was home about 9 to 9:30. I got a call. The young lady had been found lying in the middle of the road on I-47. I responded out there, found out what we had, and the chief registered at the time, our captain, took over the scene. I went over to the hospital to check on the young lady, and when I got there, I found out that she had been pronounced deceased. I met her dad at exit 58, took him over to identify her remains. One of the hardest things that I've ever gone through. I still can see Lauren there lying in the East Alabama Medical Center, lifeless. Investigators quickly began processing both crime scenes. At the highway where Lauren was first found, they collected evidence, tire tracks, and road evidence, as well as witness statements from motorists who had stopped by to help. At the parking lot on campus where the car was found, they conducted a forensic examination of the vehicle and collected Lauren's belongings that were still inside of the car: her clothing, some cash, and a digital camera, but her credit card seemed to be missing. 2 witnesses came forward and stated that when they first saw Lauren lying on the side of the road, as they turned their cars around to go over and help her, they saw a dark colored Honda Civic speeding off toward the direction of campus. Lauren's car was a black Honda Civic, so it slowly started to sound like shortly after Lauren was left on the side of the road by whoever had her car was being driven to campus and then set on fire. And investigators assumed that the reason as to why the car was probably set on fire was in hopes of destroying any and all evidence left inside of there. So very quickly, pretty much from the start, this looked like a homicide, and it was feeling like Lauren had probably been abducted or taken or pushed or forced into her own car against her will. They knew that she was forced to remove her clothing because she was found wearing only socks, and they felt like she tried to escape because the road rash and the injuries that she had suggested that she jumped from a moving vehicle, and the person who did this attempted to then destroy the evidence by leaving that car in the parking lot. But who would do such a thing? By talking to Lauren's friends, investigators began putting together a timeline of what her day must have looked like on March 4th. In the morning, she got breakfast with her boyfriend before going to class at 11 a.m. After class, she then talked to her dad on the phone, then she went over to her boyfriend's dorm and took a nap. After that, she left in her own car because she had plans to meet up with a friend at a library to study at around 8:30 p.m. But Lauren never made it to the library. The friend that she was supposed to meet told authorities that she talked to Lauren on the phone just before, and all Lauren said was that she had completely forgotten about their plans, and then she quickly, abruptly hung up the call, which was really strange. Investigators got their first major lead in the case when Lauren's stolen credit card was being used. Remember, I said her credit card was not found in her car with the rest of her belongings. Well, that's because it was taken. At 9:17 p.m., just after Lauren was left on the highway, her credit card was used at a gas station on North College Street in Auburn to purchase $14 worth of gasoline. Less than 24 hours later, it was used then again in Atlanta, Georgia to buy more gas, and then the morning after it was used at a Kroger. And using surveillance camera footage, investigators were able to see that it was a man using Lauren's car. They worked to enhance the image of the CCTV footage, but it was still very, very hard to see a face, and they needed help identifying the man in the footage. The FBI then got involved because the perpetrator had crossed state lines from Alabama to Georgia while using the stolen credit card. And then came March 7th of 2008. A 23-year-old man was pulled over in Georgia for speeding. He was pulled over, asked to get out of the car, when all of a sudden, he pushed past the officer, got back inside of his car, and attempted to flee the scene, speeding off in his car. That started a high-speed chase, in which then the guy jumped out of his car and began fleeing on foot. A group of officers chased him down into a wooded area where they eventually got him and they put him in handcuffs. That guy was 23-year-old Courtney Lockhart, an Army veteran, and he had quite the lengthy criminal history. When Courtney was taken into custody for trying to run away from the officers after he was pulled over for speeding, they realized that this guy was wanted for questioning in multiple robberies across Alabama and Georgia. But not only that, he also happened to match the description of the man seen in surveillance footage using Lauren's stolen credit card. And because he was not only in Alabama but also in Georgia, they had reason to believe that he could be directly connected to Lauren's case, and it was only confirmed to them that they were on the right track when they found physical evidence to prove so. When officers searched Courtney's car, they found Lauren's iPod directly connecting him to the murder and signs of a weapon matching the description of what they thought could have been Lauren's murder weapon, as well as other stolen items linking him to multiple robberies. Come to find out, Courtney also had a history of being quite violent against women and also had a history of robbing women and ambushing them in parking lots. When he was confronted with this overwhelming amount of evidence against him, Auburn police officers pressed him about Lauren's murder. Initially, he said that he knew nothing about it, but then on March 8th of 2008, Courtney Lockhart gave a full confession. When he confessed, he described himself as a man whose life had completely and totally fallen apart, saying that he was essentially homeless and that he had been sleeping inside of his car in different parking lots. On March 3rd, he told authorities that he had been sleeping in his car at East Alabama Medical Center and was supposed to go to a job site, but said that that was canceled and he didn't have enough gas money to drive back home. So on March 4th, he had been driving around aimlessly with nowhere to go. Courtney told investigators that he ended up at Auburn University's campus and parked in a lot near Hinton Field behind the dorms. He deliberately backed into the parking space to hide his license plate, and then he just sat there and watched students go about their day. At around 8 p.m., he said that he saw Lauren walking towards her car and he approached her and her vehicle. He went up behind her, pulled out his weapon, and pointed it at her. Lauren backed up into the passenger seat. Courtney got in the driver's seat and drove away with one hand on the wheel and the other hand holding the weapon pointed at her. As soon as they left campus, Lauren handed him everything that she had, $200 in cash, and she was pleading for him to either leave or to let her leave, but he didn't leave. He instead ordered ordered her to remove her clothing. According to him, his reasoning for doing so was so that she wouldn't try to run away or, quote, wouldn't do anything or make any crazy moves, end quote. For 30 minutes, they drove around. The entire time, Lauren was terrified, but somehow, someway, she still managed to show him compassion. Courtney was telling her all about how his life was a mess, and Lauren was trying to help him, saying that she knew someone who could help get him a job, but Courtney was just getting progressively angrier and angrier. As they kept driving around, Lauren's phone then started ringing. Her boyfriend was calling to check up on her, and then her friend, who she was supposed to meet at 8:30 p.m. at the library, then also called her. Courtney allowed her to answer her phone when her friend was calling, but then he forced her to lie, claiming that she had, quote, forgotten about the study session. So remember, her friend mentioned to authorities that she had spoken to Lauren on the phone, but Lauren just said that she forgot about the plans and then abruptly hung up the call. During that time, she was in her car with Courtney with a weapon being pointed to her face, which is so sad and so scary to think about. Obviously, her friend had no idea. Lauren kept trying to talk to Courtney, trying to plead for her life, offering him help for work, and literally showing him humanity, even though he showed her zero, but nothing worked. As they kept driving down Highway 147, Lauren made a split-second decision. She opened up the passenger door and she jumped out of the moving vehicle, and that's when Courtney used his weapon just inches away from her body, piercing both of her lungs. He fell to the ground, and Courtney then drove away, leaving her on the roadside wearing only her socks. Then he ditched her car, fled, and continued using Lauren's credit card in Atlanta and Georgia before throwing it out of his window. Over the next 3 days, he robbed 3 more women, and those 3 robberies included him pointing his weapon at a 3-year-old child and attacking a 72-year-old woman. And then he was found speeding, he was pulled over, and we know what happened after that. Following his confession, Courtney Lockhart was formally charged with capital murder, kidnapping, robbery, and attempted, but he was later acquitted of the charge at trial. The case attracted massive national attention, and his defense attorneys filed multiple motions for a change in venue, arguing that the extensive media coverage had made a fair trial impossible. His trial officially began November 8th of 2010, approximately 2.5 years after Lauren's murder. It lasted a total of 9 days, and his defense team tried their best to argue that he wasn't in the right state of mind, that he didn't know what he was doing because he had suffered from PTSD after serving 16 months in the army. Courtney himself remained completely quiet throughout the entire thing, showing no emotion. And on November 18th of 2010, after hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty and recommended life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then in March of 2011, the judge overruled the jury's unanimous recommendation and sentenced Courtney Lockhart to death, stating that he had a clear pattern of escalating violence. He was then sent to Holman Correctional Facility in Alabama, where he remains on death row today. Ended a poor girl's life and ruined so many people's lives. For what? And I, of course, went on this video by remembering Lauren, actually from a quote from the former Chief Dawson. Remember, he served as Auburn Police Chief from 2010 to 2013 and got to meet Lauren's family. In 2021, during an Auburn City Council meeting, he stated the following. This quote makes me cry. He said, quote, "I'd like to ask each one of you to say a prayer this coming Friday, March the 4th. Back in 2008, we lost Mrs. Lauren Burke on March the 4th. I'll never forget it, and I ask none of you ever forget it. I promised her dad her death would never be in vain. We will never forget her. We have not forgotten her, Mr. Burke. She's constantly on my mind and in my heart. And if any young ladies are listening to this council meeting tonight, think of Lauren. You always think it can't happen to you, but it can happen to you. Take the extra precautions, and if you feel at the least uneasy about something, just something doesn't feel right to you, call the Auburn Police Division. We'll be glad to walk you to your car. I say we, Chief Anderson and his folks now, would be glad to walk you to the car. It's hard to get away from saying we, but we deeply care about our students, especially our young ladies. For all of us that have daughters, you know what I'm talking about. It's a tough thing to let your daughter go. So just please be careful out there. If anyone that hears this can spread my message, it can happen to you when you don't think that it can. And to Mr. Burke, again, I'm so sorry for what you're going through. I know it never gets easier, and prayers are still with you, my friend. It's so sad. I couldn't think of a more fitting message to end this video with rather than that quote. So that is all from me today. Thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you for listening to Lauren's story. And I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy. And I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
Freediving is one of the most dangerous sports in the world, even though technically pretty much anybody who's ever swam before has then also freedived, because all freediving is diving underwater without the use of a breathing apparatus like a scuba tank. But when people talk about freediving, they're not talking about the kids down at the local swim club. They're talking about those crazy people that go out into the middle of the ocean, take huge gulps of air, and then dive down to unbelievable depths and stay down there for several minutes before returning to the surface. And within this already extreme sport, there's an even more extreme version of it called no limits. Instead of the diver taking that big gulp of air on the surface and then turning around and fitting themselves down to depth or pulling themselves down on a weighted rope, in no limits freediving, the divers are allowed to use whatever they want to get as deep as they can possibly handle. Again, the only rule is you can't use a breathing apparatus. The most common no limits technique is to grab hold of this sled that is connected to this bottom weighted vertical cable, and the freediver holds onto that sled, it's released from the surface, and the sled rockets down to whatever their desired depth is, and the diver just holds on, and then once they reach the bottom, the diver then turns a switch which shoots air into this big balloon that's attached to the sled, and once the balloon is filled enough, it will pull the sled and the diver who's hanging onto it back up the cable, back up to the surface. Normally, a no limits freedive using this technique takes approximately 3 minutes start to finish. The reason no limits is considered a more extreme version of freediving is because it allows the divers to go to these extraordinary depths that they physically are not capable of getting to on their own. We're talking about over 100 meters below the surface. There's just no way a person can just kick themselves down there. You would need the sled. And then conversely, you would not be able to swim 100 meters back up to the surface before you drown. You would have to use that balloon. And so in no limits freediving, when you go down to these crazy depths, if your equipment fails, it's usually fatal. On October 12, 2002, 28-year-old Audrey Mestry was sitting on a floating platform off the coast of the Dominican Republic. The French native no limits diver was mentally preparing herself for what she was about to do. Audrey was one of the best freedivers in the world, and this day she was trying to become the best freediver in the world by breaking the world record for the deepest depth achieved by a no limits freediver, which was 170 meters. And that record was actually held by her husband, Pippin Ferreras. But as she sat on that platform, doubt must have crept into her mind, because storm clouds began to roll in, and in the world of no limits freediving, where so many things can go wrong, there's no reason to add in another risk factor like bad weather. It could affect the people on the surface that are trying to support you. It could affect the line that you're using to bring you down to depth. It's just an unnecessary risk. Also, Audrey was using a new piece of equipment. She had a slightly thinner cable that was going to bring her down to the bottom that her sled was attached to, but she didn't know if it would work for this deep of a dive. And her husband, who was in charge of safety for this dive, had been criticized in the diving community for rushing this record attempt, that he hadn't done enough preparations. There weren't enough medical staff. There wasn't enough standby divers that were going to be on site or on shore at the time of this dive. And Audrey was aware of these criticisms because her husband was regularly criticized. In 1993, after an exhaustive review of hundreds of sites around the United States, executives from the German car company Mercedes-Benz had finally come to their decision. Tuscaloosa, Alabama would become the site of the first ever passenger car assembly factory outside of Germany. This was a historic day, not just for Mercedes, but also for Alabama. At the time, the state had one of the highest unemployment rates in the nation, and so residents of Alabama were hopeful this factory would create hundreds of new jobs. But what actually happened shattered their expectations. Immediately following this announcement by Mercedes that they were going to set up shop in Tuscaloosa, 3 other major automotive giants, Toyota, Honda, and Hyundai, all announced that they too would be setting up shop in Alabama. And so these 4 major factories all came with jobs of their own, and each of these factories attracted dozens of other smaller factories that supplied the parts to put together these cars. And so all these smaller factories came with additional jobs. And so this one decision by Mercedes didn't just create hundreds of new jobs in Alabama. It created tens of thousands of new jobs all across the state. 2 years later, in 1995, a little girl named Regina Elsie was born just about an hour away from the Mercedes factory in Tuscaloosa. Growing up, the automotive manufacturing industry was a big part of her life. Her family worked in the factories, and as a kid, every day when she went outside, she would see dozens of these 18-wheelers come bombing down the road in front of her house, carrying car parts on their way to one of the many factories. Regina was a reserved and quiet kid. She loved to read, she was a good student, and she loved animals. She would take in stray animals, any animal she could find, she would bring it back home to her house, but her favorite animal was her dog, who she named Cow. She dreamed of becoming a pediatrician, and so after high school, she enrolled in a local community college on a federal grant with plans to eventually transfer out to Auburn University, where she would finish her degree and then hopefully go on to medical school. But while she was at the community college, she fell in love with a local boy named Dan, who she'd actually gone to kindergarten with. And before long, the two were engaged to be married. The young couple wanted to move in together, but they didn't have enough money. Regina was a full-time student, so she didn't have an income, and Dan barely made minimum wage working as a shelf stalker at Walmart. The only way they could get their own place would be if Regina dropped out of school and got a job too. This was a difficult decision for Regina because she still wanted to be a pediatrician, but at the same time, she was really excited about her future with Dan, and so she thought, I'm only 20 years old, I can always come back and get my education later and become a doctor later. And so in January of 2016, she disenrolled from her classes and went out looking for a job. A month later, she landed a job as an assembly line worker at a car parts supplier factory where her stepfather and one of her sisters currently worked. It was called Agin USA, and they supplied parts to Hyundai and to Kia. Regina's mother told her that it was not a great place to work, that she had worked at 2 other similar auto parts supplier factories, and the pace and pressure was unbearable. Car part suppliers are known for being under intense pressure to reach their quotas every single day. Failure to do so, even by a slim margin, can lead to massive fines imposed on them by their customers, like in this case, Hyundai and Kia. This immense pressure on these suppliers often leads them to overwork their employees, like Regina. And the employees develop a sort of production at all costs mentality because they see their employer only cares about hitting their daily quota. And so employees will cut corners and skirt safety regulations to ensure they stay on their quota. But after Regina's mother approached her and told her about all these horrible things about the auto parts supplier factories, Regina said, I got bills to pay. She'd already moved into a house in southeastern Alabama near the Agin factory. She was living there with her fiance Dan and her beloved dog Cow. She had bought herself a brand new car, which she was very proud of, and she had found herself the perfect wedding dress that fit her just right, but it cost $4,000. And so Regina was not about to walk away from this job. She needed the money. When she first started at Agin, she was put on temporary status, which meant she only made $8.75 an hour. In order for her to make more money, she would need the company to shift her to full-time status, which came with a $1.75 per hour raise. Determined to show the company she was worthy of being shifted to that full-time status, Regina volunteered for 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. But by June of that year, after 6 months of this hellacious work schedule, Regina was over it. And she went to her parents' house, she laid on the couch, and she told them that she just couldn't do it anymore. And in fact, she was going to start looking for other work, preferably something she could do part-time, so she could go back to school and continue to pursue her career as a pediatrician. And her family was relieved and excited to see her get her life back to normal. A few days later, on June 18th, Regina, who was still employed at Agin, was working the day shift at the factory. Her job that day was to oversee a robot that would weld on these metal pillars onto the front right and the front left of the car where the side view mirrors would attach to. This robot looked like a giant arm protruding from the ground, where at the end of the arm, where the hand would be, were 2 welding tips that stuck out about 4 inches each. The robot was surrounded by this huge chain link fence that was there specifically to keep the employees from getting too close to it while it was in operation. Regina would oversee this robot via a computer screen outside of that cage. At some point in the afternoon, as Regina is monitoring her computer, it comes across the screen that there is a stud fault on robot 23. Now, her robot was not Robot 23. It was the robot adjacent to her station. But the person in charge of overlooking Robot 23 was a part of her team, and her team had a daily quota to hit. And so having Robot 23 down directly impacted Regina. And so Gina stepped away from her computer. She walked over to the outside of Robot 23. She spoke to the team member, and they decided it was best to just call maintenance and have them come by and try to clear the fault. A security camera inside of the factory was aimed down at Regina and her coworkers as they stood outside of the metal cage around Robot 23 waiting for maintenance. But after quite a while, maintenance still hadn't shown up, and it was obvious the team was getting very anxious. They know every second that robot was not operational, they were hurting their chances of reaching their quota, which the company would be very upset about because they'd be hit with a big fine. And so at some point, Regina just kind of says, screw it, I'm going to fix the fault myself. And so she picks up a small tool that looks like a screwdriver, she opens up the cage to Robot 23, and she steps inside and walks right for the stem of the robot. When she gets over to it, she has her back to the robot's arm that's behind her, and she begins doing something with her tool to the stem of the robot. And whatever she does, it works because the robotic arm behind her springs into life and immediately goes back into the action it had been trying to perform before it failed. And that action involved swinging back in Regina's direction. And when it did, those 2 4-inch welding tips at the end of the robotic arm were driven directly into Regina's back, impaling her. Her coworkers saw it happen and hit the emergency shutoff switch, but it didn't power down the robot until after it had thrust Regina across the cage and pinned her up against the wall. wall. And so with this robot now powered down, the welding tips were now run all the way through her upper back and pressed up against the wall. She was literally pinned to the wall like tacking up a piece of paper with 2 tacks in a corkboard. She slouched over, but her eyes were wide open. She was conscious, but she didn't make a sound. Nobody knew how to release Regina from the robot's grasp. And so the team leader hopped on a forklift and sped across the factory floor towards the break room. He ran inside, he found a maintenance worker, and he dragged him out. They got on the forklift. The maintenance worker had to sit on the team leader's lap, and they sped back across the factory towards the Robot 23 cage. When they got there, they took this maintenance guy and basically thrust him into the cage and told him to get Regina out. But the maintenance worker didn't speak any English. He was terrified at what he was seeing Regina the way she was. He didn't really know how to fix the situation. Tempers were flaring, and before long, the maintenance worker just got overwhelmed and ran away. When emergency crews finally arrived several minutes later, Regina was still pinned by this robot. She was conscious, her eyes were wide open, and she was still totally silent. And they were able to get her off. They sent her to a hospital, and then she was transported to a trauma center, but it was too late. The damage that had been done to her by getting impaled by this robot was just too extensive, and she died at the hospital. It would turn out Regina's company, Agent, had not properly trained her or any of her coworkers. Agent's policy was to hire people and as fast as possible get them on the floor, helping them reach their quota. And so as a result, Regina and her team members had no idea about a so-called lockout procedure, where if you're going to go inside one of these robots' cages, you need to make sure the power switch has been locked out, meaning it will not turn back on if you fix the fault that has caused your robot to stop. All Regina and her coworkers knew is that the most important thing is hitting your quota at the end of the day. And so that was the reason Regina went inside of the cage, and that was the reason Regina was killed. Agent ultimately pleaded guilty to not having properly trained Regina, leading to her death, and they paid the family $1.5 million.
Cassadaga, Florida sounds like a wildly interesting place, but today we're just going to focus on the only hotel that is in that town. This hotel openly talks about how they believe it is haunted and that you are going to have some kind of experience if you stay the night there. Now, the town of Cassadaga itself is a very unique town. It's a very spiritual town. It was founded in 1895 by George Colby. He was a spiritualist, and this town is filled with mediums and psychics. If those are two different things or they're the same, explain that to me in the comments, I guess, because I don't know what the difference is. And the Cassadaga Hotel has been a very popular place for people to stay while they're visiting. This hotel opened in 1927, but it dates all the way back to 1901 when there was a old wooden version of the hotel, but this hotel burned down on Christmas Eve of 1926. Everyone survived the fire, but people do believe that it left an energetic mark in the place where this hotel is now. People have said that when they stay there, they feel a lot of energy in the area, and it's not necessarily bad. It doesn't feel like this is like bad energy or that there's bad ghosts there. They just feel energy. And you can add a whole bunch of add-ons to your stay at the hotel, like seances, things like that. Many guests have said that they didn't really believe in spirits or ghosts before they came to stay there, but after they stayed, they became believers. They would often wake up with a lot of their things having moved around, but the thing that I guess creeped me out the most was a lot of people said that they experienced whispering throughout the night, so much so that they couldn't sleep. Some guests going as far as to saying they could hear the spirits whispering like directly in their ear. Some people have even said that they've heard children giggling up and down the hallways, which is weird because this hotel is 21 and up. You have to be 21 years old to stay at this hotel, so there's no children on the property. One prominent ghost who allegedly haunts these halls is an Irish man named Arthur. He came there in the 1930s and absolutely refused to leave. They believe that he's still there to this day. If you reserve the room that he stayed in, they will warn you that Arthur is a little bit desperate for your attention. He will often flicker the lights and walk through you, leaving you with a cold chill. Some people have even seen him sitting or standing at the foot of their bed. The owner of the Cassadaga Hotel said that on her very first night after she bought the hotel, she spotted a man on the staircase in the lobby. Now, she said that this man seemed slightly off. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she knew that he was not a living person that was in the hotel. Cassadaga has many other little haunted spaces that you could go visit while you're in the town. It just seems awfully interesting, but what are your thoughts on this? Would you stay the night? Let me know down in the comments and follow for more spooky things.
I think someone's in the loft. I don't know if you're going to hear this on camera. It is currently 1:21 a.m. This has been going off for a while. This has woke me up. torch on because it's absolutely pitch black. Please tell me that you can hear this. I've come out, but am I fuck going up there? Absolutely not. There's like a hatch. And nah. What the?
Went in to see a little bit more of the loft and her home to better help me read, because the more pictures I have, the more visuals I have, the better. Her follow-up video, she talks about what she does and how she goes out to these haunted places, and she was concerned, like, did she bring something home, although she protects herself? Is this related to the other stuff happening in the home? Here's my read. A man with what looks like cowboy boots, but they're like really pointy boots. That's who she heard that night, that walking around, not connected to what's going on inside the house. There's multiple things happening. I don't feel she brought this home with her. I don't feel this is attached to her. I feel like there's multiple things happening. I feel like this home, it's strange, because I almost want to say when she moved in, it wasn't haunted. And since then, a lot has changed. But I also want to say a lot has changed from a cosmic perspective. And this veil is thinning and thinning, right? And so we're feeling and seeing things that maybe 10 years ago we wouldn't have seen or felt. Different conversation for another time. You can go to our Patreon page where we get more into this and some of our other videos. But for her sake, this man is, I almost want to say he's on a phone. Can't tell how old the phone is. So I'm getting kind of mixed messages on what time frame, because this doesn't feel like super old. He looks and feels fairly recent. And when I say fairly recent, in the last 20, 30 years. Not like hundreds of years old. And he's pacing. And he's on his phone, and he's discussing business. And he doesn't feel like he even knows he's passed, and he doesn't really even know that he's there. So this is definitely not someone who's doing the growling. This is definitely not someone who's moving stuff around. It almost feels similar to, I read something similar, another home similar, I can't remember which one it was. Maybe you guys will remember, where I said I felt this family passing through, like they had just passed and they were passing through. Oh, the Green Manor. This family of 5, I think I said, they passed through, and it was a one-time thing. That's what this feels like. This feels like someone who's like here, no connection to the home, not even sure why he's here, and that's it. And I feel like he's even gone. Like, I don't even feel like he's still there. Times are strange. I've been doing this work for 25 years, and I can tell you that it is a different time. And we are feeling and seeing things stronger, bigger, clearer. It's pretty incredible to watch.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
American Horror Story has given us some of the most iconic witches in pop history. So today we're going to be covering the strongest witches in the American Horror Story universe. I talk about the strongest witch in each coven that we know of so far. And at this point in American Horror Story, we've been introduced to 3 very different types of leaders. First is the Supreme, the second is the Alpha, and the third is the Auteur. I'm going to start off with the Supreme because that's the one we most commonly know. Then I'll cover the other 2 at the end. In the video that I make regarding the supremacy, you'll hear me say that what we learn about it or what we know about it is largely speculation. There have been many contradictory points in American Horror Story, so I always say that what we know is purely deduced by the witches in the coven, which means that the supremacy itself is still an entirely mysterious force, and we may never uncover its mysteries. With that being said, there are a couple of indicators that mark a Supreme. The first is the ability to perform the 7 wonders. Now, this doesn't mean that a witch who can perform the 7 wonders will eventually become the Supreme, because it also takes a mastery as well. And this is something that was never expanded on, so we don't know what mastery means per se. Does it mean the ability to perform a wonder once or several times? It's never elaborated on. The second thing is that a Supreme is marked by glowing health. Again, another contradiction that is in the American Horror Story universe, because the reigning Supreme, Cordelia Fox, was unable to conceive a child, which is generally not a health issue unless you want to have a baby. Another thing that I thought I would mention about the Supreme is the fact that just because she's able to perform the 7 wonders and has the ability to use a wider range of spells, this does not mean that she has the abilities of all of the witches in her coven. So for instance, if a witch has a genetic disposition toward a certain gift, that doesn't mean that she'll be able to use that gift. Take Zoe Benson's Black Widow abilities or Queenie's ability to perform voodoo. Since those are unique to their bloodlines, a Supreme would not readily have them. However, a Supreme can develop gifts that are outside of the 7 wonders. For instance, Fiona did develop the ability to read minds, and this is something that Nan could do as well. Now, there's 2 methods that can be used to identify a new Supreme. The first is the more preferred method, and that is the reigning Supreme choosing a successor. This eliminates the loss of life within the coven. And then the second, less preferred way, but at times the more necessary way, is the sacred taking. This might be implemented in the event that a Supreme is no longer able to lead and a witch or a coven is desperately in need of a new Supreme, in which case the Supreme must sacrifice her life and the witches must engage in the trial of the 7 wonders. Now, you don't want to have to get to this route, and this is why it's imperative that a Supreme chooses a successor instead. The second strongest magic user we're introduced to in American Horror Story is the Alpha. The Alpha is basically the equivalent of a Supreme, but he's not supposed to exist. In fact, he exists mostly in myth and legend, up until the birth of Michael Langdon. Now, what's important about the Alpha is that the Alpha is supposed to supplant the Supreme and lead warlocks back to dominance over the Supreme and the witches. And this is something that causes some strife between the 2 parties. However, one of the things that sets Michael Langdon apart from other warlocks is the fact that he's a level 4 warlock, meaning that he can perform all 4 of the tests that Hawthorne has, and that he can perform and master the 7 wonders. And this is unheard of, and it puts the witches on edge. Now, the third most powerful magic user that we meet in American Horror Story is the Auteur. Basically, that's just Siobhan Corbin, because there's only one. Now, to me, this is the witch who had limitless potential had they developed her character. And sadly, because they didn't, it ended up being wasted potential. However, what we do know makes me think that she is much stronger than the Supreme that we know of. And based on her affiliation, it's very likely she would have supported Michael Langdon if he was a woman. So the Auteur, unlike the Supreme, is immortal and has the ability to grant immortality. On top of this, she has the ability to grant powers as well. And sadly, we didn't see the full extent of her gifts, so we'll never know what she was fully capable of. But anyways, let me know who your favorite magic user in the series is so far, and I will see you guys in my...
Was this young boy murdered in cold blood by his best friend, or was his death the result of a terrible accident? I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the death of Robert Houlihan. Robert was an 11-year-old boy living in the beautiful Cork Island. He was described as a very typical young boy. He was happy, he was cheery, he was cheeky, he absolutely loved spending time outdoors, he loved riding on his bike and riding horses. He would actually often go up to the stables to ride the horses, but also helped with all of the cleaning and mucking out of the stables. This is something that he absolutely loved to do. Robert was very much a mixer. He could talk to anyone and he could make friends wherever he went, and wherever he went, he always made himself comfortable. He would regularly visit his neighbour's house to see his best friend, but he considered this best friend more like an older brother. This was a man named Wayne O'Donoghue. Wayne was 21 years old in 2005 and was studying engineering at university. He would describe his relationship with Robert saying, quote, "I had known him for a number of years. He was a regular caller to the house and could call several times on any given day. I was a good friend of his. We played PlayStation as well as football and hurling." Robert and Wayne were really close, and when Wayne got his driving license and then eventually his car, he and Robert would often jump in the car to go to McDonald's to get milkshakes. And on the 4th of January 2005, Robert would turn up at Wayne's house in hopes of going and doing just that. This was actually the second time that Robert was turning up at Wayne's house asking to go out and get milkshakes, and it was the second time that Wayne refused. They then playfully swore at each other, which good friends, especially brothers, do, and Robert began to tease Wayne, picking up little pebbles and throwing them off of his car. But Wayne did not find this funny. He found this really annoying and irritating, and he was worried about his car. So he was telling Robert to stop it, to pack it in, but Robert wouldn't. He was very insistent about going for this milkshake. Wayne later described in his own words what happened, saying, quote, "I walked over to him and I put my right arm around his neck. I jerked him away from the bike towards the rear hand side of the car. I released the grip with my right hand and I was still holding him with my left hand by the scruff of the neck. Nothing was said between us at this stage. I then moved my left hand up to his Adam's apple. He was against the right rear hand side of my car. I said, 'Will you stop at the fucking stones?' I can't describe how tight I held him. I don't know how long I had him held. But it seemed very short. I did not intend to cause him any harm or injury. When I removed my left hand from his throat, he just fell to the ground." After this, Wayne went into a panic. He quickly picked up Robert's body and ran him upstairs to the bathroom, splashing Robert's face with cold water, shaking him, hoping that Robert would come around. But nothing was working. Robert's eyes remained closed and his body remained limp. He was gone. Wayne had killed him. Wayne would then wrap up Robert's body in black bin bags and forced him into the boot of his car. He then grabbed Robert's bike and chucked it in the back seat before speeding off. The bike would be dumped in a nearby ditch and Wayne proceeded to drive outside of Middleton, which was the area that they lived in, and dumped Robert's body in some undergrowth. He would then go on about the rest of his day as if nothing had happened. He walked his dog, he spent some time with his girlfriend, he calmly ate his tea, and he even played on his PlayStation. He would later say that he only did this because he had to keep up appearances that everything was fine to squash any suspicions. However, what had happened was eating him up inside. Because of the guilt that he was claimed that he was feeling, Wayne decided to go back out to where he had dumped Robert's body. Wayne had theorized that because Robert's body was wrapped up in black bin bags, it would be harder for someone to discover, and he didn't want Robert's body laying there for a long amount of time. He wanted Robert to be discovered. So the best solution that he came up with was to set the bags on fire. A couple of hours later, Robert's mum would ring Wayne's house phone and asked Wayne if he had seen Robert anywhere. He hadn't came back home and she was very worried. He could hear in her voice that she was extremely concerned about her son. Wayne told her that yes, he had seen him earlier in the day, but not since then. What ensued after this was an 8-day search for 11-year-old Robert Houlihan. Over 700 volunteers aided in the search for the missing young boy, including Wayne and his brothers, who helped every single day of the search, and they would search for hours, sometimes staying up till 5 o'clock in the morning. However, on the 12th of January 2005, the search was called off. This came after Wayne approached the police and confessed to what he had done. His trial began around about a year later, where Wayne would plead not guilty to murder, but try to put forward a plea of manslaughter. This meant that he had to go through a trial. Robert's family had to sit through the entire thing, hearing all of the horrifying details of their son's death, which they very strongly did. They were in attendance for every single day of the 10-day trial, during which Wayne did appear to show regret, remorse, and sorry for what he had done. He took accountability for his actions and gave some insight into his mindset after what he had done. He admitted to the court that after he realised he had killed Robert, he was going to take his own life. He was stood with a knife at his throat, but he didn't do it. He didn't harm himself. He would explain why, saying, quote, "I don't know why I didn't. I was probably a coward. Something came over me, a family who loved me, and a girlfriend who I love." At the end of the trial, Wayne O'Donoghue was found guilty to the charge of manslaughter and handed a sentence of 4 years to serve for the death of 11-year-old Robert Houlihan. If you thought that that sentence was incredibly low for literally taking another person's life, he didn't even serve that. He was released from prison a year early for good behaviour.
When a human foot washed up on shore, they knew he was no longer missing. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Antonio Neal. Viewer discretion is advised. This case will take us to Everett, which is located in Washington. That is where 22-year-old Antonio Neal lived with his family. It was December 12th, 2016. Antonio had said goodbye to his mother because he was going to be going to a friend's house, and then he would be home either later that night or the next day. He never got home. And so by the following day, when his mother realized she hasn't heard from him, she hasn't seen him, she's calling around, but no one's saying they know where he is. I guess he went to like some kind of house party or something, located on the 2400 block of Cedar Street in Everett. And according to witnesses, Antonio seems to have gotten into some kind of fight or physical altercation with another man there. Who that man is, I'm not sure. I'm sure the police probably do, but I don't know his name. But then it seems like a short time after that, he just disappeared. Antonio drove a 2000 Volkswagen Jetta, which was then later found by police. I guess that was found in the area of Linwood, which it looks like, this based on the map, because I'm obviously not from there, looks like it's about 14 or 15 miles away from Everett. But there were no signs of any kind of foul play or anything in the car. And sadly, by all accounts, his case just goes cold. Nobody knows where he is. Nobody knows what happened. I have to assume they've done the cell phone pings, because this was 2016. I just don't know if they've gotten anything from it. There really isn't a lot published about this case. And then something tragic happens in 2019, and it was actually New Year's Day. A couple was just taking a leisurely walk along this river here. I guess this is on Jetty Island, when at first they saw a shoe. When they looked closer, they realized this was more than just a shoe. There was still a human foot inside of it. And so obviously the police are contacted. When Antonio's mom sees a photo of the shoe, she immediately knows that that's her son. The sock was still on the foot, and when she saw the sock, she's like, I saw him put those socks on that day. And then they would confirm that the foot inside was, in fact, Antonio's. It was obviously quite a shock, especially considering that's the only part that was found. Nothing else was found, just the foot. They said there were no obvious signs of trauma, but obviously this is a severed foot. They have no idea how it got that way. They can't tell from the foot if this was a murder or an accident or what. However, police are still considering this case to be, at the very least, a suspicious death. They haven't said like, oh yeah, he just accidentally fell into the water and somehow this happened. You know, I think there is that belief in the back of everyone's minds that he was killed, and possibly just based on the foot, possibly dismembered and thrown into the water, which is pretty wild that it's still washed up on shore like almost 2 years later. So I guess this is off of the Snohomish River, which is a huge river. I have to assume they've searched parts of it, but it's a very big body of water. And with this being years later, you know, there's no telling if the rest of the body will be there or not. But as of this point, no other body parts have washed up. No other body parts have been found. But somebody somewhere out there does know the truth about what happened to him. Was it the person he got into a fight with? Who is that person? Have they ruled that person out? I don't know. Somebody knows. Somebody knows the answers to this, and perhaps that someone is you. If you have any information on what may have happened to Antonio Neal, you are asked to please call 425-388-3845. You can also make anonymous tips to 1-800-222-8477.
In the early 1940s, up and down the East Coast, there was a man known as the Aspirin Bandit who possibly had attacked over 200 women and ended up aliving one of them. I don't have a lot of pictures for this story, so bear with me here. So on January 13th, 1941, police were called to the apartment of Elizabeth and Tom Allen. Police speak with Elizabeth, and she claims about 2:45, a man had knocked on the door, claiming that she knew her husband. He knew he was on a bakery route in Connecticut and knew a lot of details about him. This man was apparently from Boys Town, and she felt sorry for him. So her husband ended up giving him some money because he felt bad for him, and he wanted to thank him for lending him some money. But her husband was not home at the time. But he said he had a headache and asked if he could have an aspirin, and she decided to get him some water and a bottle of aspirin. He then starts to attack Elizabeth. He takes her into the bedroom, ties her hands with his necktie behind her back, and then ties her feet with a towel, and then puts a handkerchief in her mouth. He is going throughout the house trying to ransack it and try to find any valuables. He then comes back into the bedroom and is about to assault her when the phone rang, but eventually it spooked him and he just fled the scene. She described this man about being 5'10", 5'11", and having an olive complexion. There was no fingerprints found on the glass that he was using to drink that water, so they believe this man has done this before. The police end up showing Elizabeth a photo lineup of anybody that has fingerprints on file that have been arrested for robbery and also SA. She eventually picks out a man named Anthony Litzy. Anthony did serve time for armed robbery, and he was working in construction, and he worked the day before at the Allens apartment building. So they decided to bring him in for questioning, and they eventually just arrested him. 3 weeks later, police are called to across town to the home of John and Catherine Pappas, where Catherine was found deceased in her bed. The entire apartment was ransacked. There was coffee cups on the table and also an open bottle of aspirin. Catherine was found in the bedroom on the bed. Her hands were tied with a necktie. Her bra had been ripped. Her clothes were pulled up a little bit, but her undergarments were still on, so there was no SA. There was scratches on her face showing that there were signs of a struggle, and she was strangled. Police spoke with a man who works in the apartment building, and he claims that Catherine's husband, John, came home about 10 p.m., so they ruled him out as a suspect. But he does remember when he was coming into work, a man was leaving very fast. He had dark hair and olive skin, and he had never seen him before in this apartment building. They speak with Catherine's husband, John, and he claims that his wife is new to the United States. I believe she's originally from Egypt, and she would never let a stranger in. He would ring the doorbell first before he came into the home because he did not want her to be scared that an intruder was coming in. So something was off. There is no way she would let a stranger in, so they are wondering what is going on here. Police end up releasing Mr. Litzy because he was locked up at the time of this crime, so he was ruled out as a suspect. But they did find a fingerprint on that water glass, but there was no hits in the system and no fingerprints on file, so they are trying to figure out who this person is. Police speak with the Allens again, asking, did you talk to any stranger about your personal life recently? And Mr. Allen remembers picking up a hitchhiker and talking about his personal life. Mr. Allen felt sorry for this man. He was an orphan, he was raised up in Boys Town, and he felt sorry for him, so he lent him a few dollars, and this man asked for his address so he can send him a thank you card. So Mr. Allen wasn't thinking, and he gave this man their address. Another couple from Manhattan had the exact same story. A man named Bob had picked up a hitchhiker, but his name was Jerry Schnoffner. Claims he was an orphan from Boys Town, and he felt sorry for him. It's the exact same story as the Allens. Bob's wife told the police that a man came to her apartment stating that he knew her husband. She felt sorry for him, made him a sandwich because she didn't want to be rude. He said he had a headache. She offered him some aspirin, and that's when he brutally attacks her, ties her hands with a necktie, and then brutally essays her. It seems at this time none of the departments were communicating and had no idea most of these attacks were by the same person. And they recall that this person was wearing a green jacket and yellow shoes. And this man had a ton of different aliases, which included Jerry Mitchell, Jerry Schnoffner, George Mundy, George Mitchell, Bill Schnei, and George Blake. So eventually they were trying to figure out who this person actually is. They eventually find 31 separate cases, including in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. So they decided to expand their search all along the East Coast, and they find 81 separate cases all the way from Maine all the way down to New Orleans. There was a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Ida, who had invited a man to stay with them for the holidays because they felt sorry for him, but he ended up robbing their place. But thankfully, Mrs. Ida was an artist and was able to draw a sketch of this man and was able to give it to the police and showed it to the victims, and they did confirm that was the man. So all of the departments in the area are communicating with each other, and they eventually get a call about a suspicious person at a hotel in D.C. Police arrive on the scene, and they realize that this man is fleeing from them, so they chase him up to the roof, but eventually he does escape down a fire escape. Police get a call that there was 2 attacks in towns north of New Jersey and realize that this man is not stopping. But they do eventually find out that he's probably going to make his way back into the city. So police have roadblocks of anyone coming into New York City, especially on the west side of Manhattan, trying to find this person. But they do eventually come up with a plan at the Mills Hotel, where they decided to stake out to see if they can find anybody matching the suspect. And eventually, out of the corner of the detective's eye, he sees a man in a green jacket with olive skin. Police do have the sketch of this man in their pocket and realize he looks exactly like the sketch. But this person knows that something is off, and he decides to try to flee the scene, but the police catch up with him and catch him. The man's name is George Joseph Speck, and his fingerprint did match on the water glass found in the Papa's apartment. George is originally from Pennsylvania, and his parents were immigrants. His father came from Yugoslavia, and then his mother was from Hungary, and he was 10 years old when he first ran into the law. So apparently George tried to rob his own house, and his mother caught him, and he ended up beating his mother. So he was sent to a reformatory school, but then eventually he started stealing vehicles, and they never ended up taking his fingerprints. So George was put into a lineup along with other detectives that looked similar to him, because back then they did not have a two-way glass, so the victims had to stand right in front of the man that brutally assaulted them. So there was multiple victims that ID'd him, and then one of the husbands almost tried to attack him because of what he had done to his wife. George knew the jig was up after multiple victims ID'd him, so he did confess to multiple assaults and also the homicide of Catherine. Now, back then, it was very hard for victims to come forward, because sometimes they don't believe they fought hard enough because they were just trying to survive. And they believed he only unalived Catherine is because she put up a fight and fought back, so that's why he strangled her. They decided to only charge him with the homicide of Catherine, and he was found guilty, and he was executed on February 26, 1942, by the electric chair. This story just broke my heart because there's possibly about 200 women that were brutally attacked, but only one of them lost their lives, and that was Catherine, only because she was the only one that fought back. All of these other victims decided to comply with George's demand, stating, "If you do not struggle, I will not unalive you." And Catherine was not going to allow that to happen. She would rather lose her life than him to brutally attack her, and that's exactly what happened. And back then, they frowned upon, women saying that you should fight back, you should fight harder. But most of these women just wanted to survive and comply with him so he would not take their lives. But Catherine, she decided to try to fight back, and ultimately it cost her life, which breaks my heart because she was the only one out of these victims that lost their lives. And I believe if Mr. Allen went to the police and remembered that he told this hitchhiker where he lived, it's possible they could have captured him and found him before he attacked Catherine and took her life. But we're not quite sure. Back then, we didn't have, a lot of communications, but eventually they did all come together and finally caught this man, and justice was done. But let me know what you guys thought of this story in the comments. Thanks for watching. I love you all. We'll see you in the next one, and please take care of yourselves.
This is why you should never ever fight a side piece, because there are some battles that you start off and later on regretting it. Story time. I have been married to my husband for many years now. We've got children together. We are very tight. We do not keep secrets from each other. I've got access to his phone, his file, his laptop, vice versa. He's got access to mine as well. So everything is fine. We are happy. We've got no issues whatsoever in this marriage. We share every little details, everything together. My husband has been sending money back home to his family to build him a house. So he decided to go and check, because you hear stories about people taking money and then not actually following and doing whatever they're supposed to do with the money. So he didn't want to be scammed. So he decided to travel just for a couple of weeks to check and see how the project is going, or if it's actually been started. Anyway, he travels back, he goes, and the project is fine. He's updating me. We're talking, we're ringing each other on video call, and then he takes longer than the actual number of weeks that he was supposed to be out there for. All of a sudden, all the contacts stops. Now, I'm starting to worry. I'm thinking maybe something has happened to him, because you hear stories about people traveling back home from abroad and then they ended up getting unalived or something happened to them. So I'm worried. I'm ringing him. No answer, nothing. Then, after 2 good months, he decided to return back abroad. He didn't explain. He didn't tell me anything why he stayed more than what he intended to do, and also why he wasn't answering my calls. Anyway, I started noticing him being secretive. But then I noticed that there's this one particular number that keeps ringing him. And remember, I have got access to his phone. So I go through his phone, I see the call logs, and I see messages. My heart stopped. I got the number and I rang, and it's a woman. She answered, and I told her that She needs to stop contacting my husband because he is married, I'm his wife, and we have got children together. And if she doesn't stop, she wouldn't like what I will do to her. Bad move. This woman tells me that since I'm starting to threaten her, I'm barking against the wrong tree. And what she's going to do to me, I will never like it. And I will regret my words today. I thought this woman is joking. She proceeded to tell me that I will lose one of my child unexpectedly. The other one is going to go deaf and mute. The other one will fall sick. And I will take her to hospital after hospital and they will never find whatever is wrong with her. I was so shocked, and I told her that, listen, how do you know that I've got this many children? She said, sit there and play. Anyway, the phone conversation ended. I didn't tell my husband about this. Then, exactly 2 months after having that conversation with that woman, one of my child had a fever. We rushed him to the hospital and he died. There, it started to play in my head that this woman did something to my child. I told my husband about it and I said he needs to cut contact with this woman. My husband said that it's impossible that someone who lives back home will be able to do something to someone living abroad. I told him that he needs to stop contacting. He denied at first, saying that he doesn't even know this woman, and also, you know, he's got nothing to do with that woman. And I said, if you don't, why don't you just like block her? And also, how did she get your number? Anyway, this carried on and my second child woke up crying that he couldn't see. There, I started to panic. I rang the woman, pleading with her, telling her that she needs to stop whatever she's doing. She needs to go back and reverse whatever she's done to my child, and I will pay her some money in return. This woman said that she will not. Instead, it's asking me to pay her over £15,000. So I tell her that I can afford that kind of money. She said I can, and if I don't, then she's going to carry on, and the next child life will be taken as well. I decided to plead with my husband, to plead with this woman. I even said he can marry the woman, he can bring her abroad and they will live their life. But all I'm asking her to do is just leave my child alone. So after a couple of months, my third child had a massive fever. Now, I've been going from pastor to pastor, trying to beg for them to save my children. My husband is not the same man that I have known. He is like a complete different man. And I don't even know what to do. So if you're married, in a relationship, engage, please never ever fight in a side chick. Never ever fight in a side piece, because it is not worth it. Some battles you might decide to take on, but then not able to finish that battle.